Welcome to Second Take, the show that focuses on the issues behind the news. Transnet hopes to gain cabinet backing for its private sector participation model by year end and expects that the first large-scale PSP projects will be developed along its key commodity export corridors. Mining Weekly editor Martin Creamer is in the studio to tell us more. Welcome to Second Take, Martin.
Hi, Shannon.
Can you tell us more about Transnet's PSP model?
Well, up to now, rail transport has been the domain of the state. What the PSP says, which is private sector participation, is that the Transnet wants the private sector to also participate in rail transport.
What benefit will it have for the mining sector?
Well, the mining sector has been logistically constrained. During the last boom, this country lost hand over fist, not because its ports couldn't cope with extra volumes, but because rail couldn't cope. And we weren't sending enough coal down along the coal line because it just couldn't cope with it. And we weren't matching demand in sending iron ore down to Saldanha Bay. And the idea is now we must try and be ahead of demand, not only just match demand.
And what approach is the model going to adopt?
Well, I think there'll be three parts of it, and I think the most important part will be dealing with the commodity lines. So I think that's probably where the first big decision will be taken, in that private sector participation will be brought into the iron ore lines and the manganese lines and the coal lines. But then there's also the question maybe of bringing in private sector into certain specialized wagon purchases. You know, if instead of Transnet having to buy wagons that may just carry chemicals and they're specialized, bring in the company that actually is wanting that facility and let them buy the wagon or participate in the purchase of the wagon, and let that wagon, although it's partly private sector owned or fully private sector owned, roll along the nationally owned rail. And
then the final prong would be?
The final prong is actually yielding entirely to the private sector in areas that Transnet has decided is non-core to it. You know, certain branch lines may be totally concessioned.
What has led to the need for this private sector involvement?
Well, the private sector involvement is needed from a financial point of view, because Transnet says it is reaching a ceiling of its funding capacity. You know, it says that it cannot go beyond 81 million tonne capacity that is on the coal line. It can't go beyond 60 million tonne on the iron ore line. And it needs some assistance in getting the manganese line up to 14 million tonnes. And it will seek from the private sector rather than trying to overload its balance sheet.
So it's just because it will be such a mega project?
These are mega projects that they're looking at, and they need partners.
Thank you so much for your time, Martin. That's the show for today. Join us again next time for more news and insight into what's happening in the mining world.